Hello, everybody, and welcome to Living One. My name is Olivia, and I'm so glad to welcome all of you today. For those of you who don't know, Living One is Krulos's monthly webinar series, now in its 6th year. With guest speakers from around the world, we listen in to how people are bringing their ethics, minds, and lives into alignment with nature for earth and animal liberation and revitalization. Our second series of 2025, Encounters with the Unseen, delves into the critical, ethical, and ontological dimensions emerging from non-duality and our existence in a world of persons, only some of whom are human. Over the course of this series, 6 speakers discuss their experiences with and exploration of the less than obvious, often non-material worlds. Journey with us into unseen territories and discover how this deeper understanding can expand and restore wholeness and connection with the vitality of our living cosmos. Our guest today is Dr. Stephanie Kaza. Dr. Kaza is a longtime practitioner of Soto Zen Buddhism, affiliated with the Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico. She is the author of Green Buddhism, Practice and Compassionate Action in Uncertain Times, Hooked, Buddhist Writings on Green Desire and the Urge to Consume, and The Conversations with Trees, an Intimate Ecology. She envisioned and coordinated the tribute volume, A Wild Love for the World, Joanna Macy and the Work of Our Time, and served as editor for the 3rd edition of Macy's collected essays, World as Lover, World as Self. She is Professor Emerita of Environmental Studies at the University of Vermont, where she taught courses on religion and ecology and unlearning consumerism. Dr. Kaza writes and lectures widely on topics of Buddhism and ecology and currently works on climate issues in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various Indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Krulo Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, takelma, daku betete, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. Finally, we ask that all of us participate today with full respect and attention to each other in the spirit of peace and wisdom that Living One seeks to foster. So without further ado, we welcome Izzy Clark and Dr. Stephanie Kaza.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And Stephanie, it's wonderful to have you with us. I don't usually do this at the beginning, but I do have Stephanie's book as a print book rather than a Kindle book, one of her books. And this was the reason that I was very keen to invite Stephanie onto the series. This is Conversations with Trees, and it is beautiful. I wanted to show you there are wonderful illustrations inside, which I think are your husband, aren't they, Stephanie? Yeah,
met him in doing the project, which was a wonderful thing.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And if you don't mind, there was just one passage that I wanted to read out to get us into the sort of the appropriate zeitgeist, perhaps. So this is in the chapter called Traces of a Lifetime, and it's the end of the chapter. And Stephanie writes, I stopped by 2 trees whose twisting spirals fit tightly together. These are the ones who will serve as witness. I do not know what I have to say, but they will help me. In the confusion of modern overstimulation, it's not easy to know what is essential, what is radically simple and to the core. I'm asking the trees to push me to my growing edge, even as they do this so elegantly themselves. What is my deepest understanding? How do I live my life as a witness to this depth of truth? What will I leave behind for others when I die? These questions penetrate to the core, stripping away all excess. There's no time to waste. I do not have 4,000 years to prepare for death. I must act on these questions now and do the hard work of growing into beauty before I die. And I just think that is so profoundly beautiful and echoes a lot of what I experience when I am in conversation with trees, though nowhere near so elegantly put. So Stephanie, thank you and welcome. I thought we'd start perhaps with asking you about your childhood and your attraction to the natural world. How did this become such an important part of your life?
Well, of course, and when I think about this, it's a long time ago, but there's certain key things that stay with you for a long time. And um, when I was growing up in Buffalo, New York, my bedroom had a little porch off the back right by the apple tree. And I think I was in love with the apple tree and when I was age 6, 7. And what I really loved doing was just hanging out watching the light. And I didn't know there was a Japanese word for this, komorebi. But the play of the wind and the breeze and the little patterns of shadows is absolutely mesmerizing and still is today for me. I'm caught by that every time in our yard or on a hike uh, or by a stream. So that was a beginning. And then my father was a violinist, and we moved from Buffalo, New York, to when he accepted a job in Portland, Oregon, in the symphony, and took a trailer with 4 kids and a month-long camping trip. Not that they knew anything really about camping, but we made it. And when we crossed the Rocky Mountains, something happened. And with my 9-year-old mind, I couldn't put any words around it, but now I call it some kind of epiphany to
Mhm.
see the scale of the mountains, the awesome majesty, something that went in deep. And from there, we, of course, entered the iconic Pacific Northwest, where I am very happy to return to after 24 years of teaching in Vermont. This is a home bioregion and a home sense of place. Now, I will just add to that that I was very fortunate growing up in the Portland area in the 50s and 60s to have a very wholesome kind of childhood and teenagehood, free of social media, free of
Mm.
cell phones, free of digital distractions. My attention span remained intact, and I was able to develop a concentrated mind that I took with me to college and then on into the rest of my life. But now that I see how much this is damaging modern generations, I am so appreciative of what seemed like an ordinary privilege at the time to play outside, to hike in the, by the creek behind the house, to read a lot and have a very rich physical presence with all the trees in the backyard, a big, big stand of Douglas firs that grew up out of the ravine. So there's a few pictures out of that early time.
And what did you go on to study academically? Did that academic work help to our series, of course, has this idea of encounters with the unseen. When you
Mhm.
moved into an academic world and started learning more in a sort of formal environment, did you start to get glimpses of the unseen in that world?
I think at Oberlin College, as a quite a young person, I was pretty overwhelmed by other things. So what was brewing across the 60s was in the world of the political unseen. And
Yeah.
when it erupted, when we came to see what was going on in Vietnam and in our own government, it really dominated everything. So, luckily, there was a space of refuge in the middle of that campus, as is not uncommon in Midwestern towns, a huge green with beautiful walkways across it and many trees that were taken care of in an arboretum sort of way. So without knowing I had chosen this, I had a kind of monastic experience in college where you walked all the time and you thought carefully and you spent time in the library and things were shaping my mind that I probably couldn't even know at the time. I was ready to major in so many different things, different languages, religion. I loved my courses in Buddhism. And eventually I settled on biology because I just wanted to know about the unseen miracles of life, really. And I feel, again, very fortunate. The word ecology was brand new, and I got to be exposed to a relational worldview through that new branch of science. And it mitigated the kind of objectifying, reductionist um, angle of most science that I was exposed to. So much more was revealed to me, I would say, when I went on to do my graduate work. So maybe I should just say for a
Yes,
minute
go
that
on. Yeah.
that was I wasn't something I ever planned to do, but I was at I was at Naropa Institute, Buddhist Studies Institute, in its second summer, being exposed to Allen Ginsberg and uh,
Wow.
Trungpa Rinpoche and amazing dancers and poets. It was a very high energy field of people trying to do arts from a Buddhist, non-egotistical, non-dualistic way. So it opened up so many possibilities of how they express themselves. When I came back from that summer, I just somehow wandered up on the campus at UC Santa Cruz, happened to go into a class on marine mammals, and just decided right there, oh, I think I'll go to graduate school. So anyway, I managed to get in, but the call, I will say, was uh, it didn't come from nowhere. Internal seeds that get planted are an unseen part of what's going on in our own minds and hearts all the time. And in the years before this, I was teaching eighth grade science, and it was the time when the dolphins were being killed for tuna. And I just went crazy for whales and dolphins, learned everything I could, wondered how this terrible Holocaust could happen, and ended up studying marine mammals in my PhD and working with one of the world's experts, Ken Norris. So I, again, was very fortunate to have his perspective. How you understand an animal's world is by starting from the beginning, assuming that you know nothing and it's all unseen to you, particularly for animals in watery environments. We just simply cannot perceive the world as they do. So this was really quite profound, his teaching on work with the animal's sensory apparatus. Well, how do they smell, see, what are they perceiving? And understand that you cannot perceive the world as they do. So it's a mystery adventure all the way, but it's an approach that's non-dualistic and is based on the absolute rule of the unseen in terms of human limitations. And that has really stayed with me for quite some time. So that's a little bit of insight of some of my good fortune in that setting.
That's great. Thank you very much. It is a fascinating story, and I loved what you said about those seeds, the seeds that are sown at a prior time being the unseen aspects of your life or your personality. That's something I'll want to sit with. You've mentioned Buddhism a few times. When did that become a part of your life, and how did the two interests were they convergent all the way through, or how did they come to entangle?
Well, there are some good personal reflections in the Green Buddhism book, both from an ecofeminist perspective. That was one place I was trying to open up a non-dualistic understanding of the world, and from a Zen perspective, and from the limitations of science. So what I could see getting a PhD in biology and an undergraduate degree was that even with an ecological worldview, it didn't include enough of human agency. A Buddhist worldview assumes that causality and relationality isn't just, the animals and the plants and the soils and the rocks out there. It's also human energy, human choices, human actions, human intentions. And this to me seemed much more complete and holistic. And I was just drawn to it like a bee to honey. So I did take a couple of courses as an undergrad, but then when I was working on my PhD, I was exposed to the Santa Cruz Zen Center as a follow-up to that Naropa Institute summer. And then later, I lived at Green Gulch Zen Center for 3 years. So I somewhat stumbled into these situations where I would just, well, let's try this and see how it feels. And that's how I met my Zen teacher, Kobun Roshi. And I was lucky enough that there were to be exposed to Thich Nhat Hanh. He came to Green Gulch. We did many days of mindfulness practice there, recited the precepts. I was in a religious institution, a spiritual environment that was very supportive because Green Gulch Zen Center was also an organic farm and it was nestled in a national park, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. So you would just hike out of the Zen Center up to the ridge and look out at the ocean above Muir Beach. So the whole time I lived in Marin County in that area, I was really building an interwoven Zen perspective on the landscape and a natural history understanding of the plants, the microregions, the birds, the marine life. And it was actually a shocking transition to go from there to Vermont when I was so deeply embedded in that landscape in that way. I should also mention I was very influenced, besides Thich Nhat Hanh and doing many retreats with him, by Gary Snyder, the beat poet, who was able in his poetry and in his caretaking of the land and his role modeling and example, his developing of ideas like bioregionalism. He was a very strong influence for me. And also the Dalai Lama, who was taking Buddhism into secular ethics. And I just read every one of the Dalai Lama's books and was able to go to Dharamsala for a retreat at one point and doing some Buddhism and environment work. And then I also want to mention Joanna Macy, of course. I feel like our mind streams are forever connected now, even though she herself is not a Zen person at all. She has been much more influenced by Tibetan Buddhism and Vipassana Buddhism. And she would sometimes just say to me, I don't get you Zen people. But we still understood the basic Buddhist principles as very important. So combination of very important human influences, role models, leaders, teachers, and being able to live in place with those ideas. It was not an abstraction. I actually had this little A-frame and no electricity, and there I was, going down to Zazen at 5 in the morning, and then later going off to be the education director at Point Reyes Bird Observatory. So my day literally was an interweaving of these things. Oops.
For those naturalists who are not Buddhist practitioners, when you have sort of spoken with them, what difference do you experience in the sense of the worldview or a sense of an understanding of ecology, of the end of the land?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, many ecologists and biologists are remarkably intimate with the unseen world. They won't put the word Buddhist on it, but they have such deep respect and humility for what they don't know and what they can't see that they are very constrained in the conclusions they will come to, and it's quite moving to be around them. I worked for 5 years with the Point Reyes Bird Observatory, and these ornithologists that work there re sort of showed that, lived that. They were not in an academic institution per se. They were there for the love of the birds and doing some remarkable work that showed what the birds were choosing and across time and seasons, and whether it was the shorebirds or the songbirds. And so I learned a lot from being around them, and I was more comfortable with field biologists, field naturalists than people in an academic, data-driven context. There's a place for that, but it tends to, be more about counting, mapping, census, objectifying, experimenting. I'm the least comfortable with the justifications for scientific experimentation. So it's a range, it's a spectrum of how people feel. But I will say from a Buddhist perspective, the level of ignorance is astonishing about the natural world. So I can't really say I was necessarily more comfortable among Buddhists because of how little they really appreciated the unseen and seen aspects of the natural world. A not very clear sense of landmarks or of seasonal rhythms or of even daily rhythms, say dusk to dawn, or high points of the year, solstices, equinox, moons. Me and a couple other people brought that to Green Gulch Zen Center, but generally it was not high on their radar screen. And I will just say, as an example of this, when I wanted to work on a collection of essays um, that would show Buddhist perspectives overlapping with environmental issues, my vision was that I would have a chapter on, endangered species and one on air pollution and one on the climate crisis. I just would pick all the main topics, and then I'd find a Buddhist scholar to write that chapter, and I would work and edit. Well, it was impossible. I could not do it. People didn't know enough to be able to write something intelligent about it. And I talked it over with different Buddhist colleagues, and what we came up with was the book that became Hooked. The one thing Buddhism can really offer a lot about is desire and ego, and what propels us to perpetuate patterns of greed, hate, and delusion. So that
Mm.
worked extremely well with the rise of consumerism. So that's kind of where that went, was this Buddhism naturalist conversation is extremely limited number of people. But to take the Buddhist teachings to a relevant arena has been appreciated. I've been kind of an interpreter, I guess I would say, and that consumerism couldn't be more relevant as a driving force of the destruction of our world.
Mm. No, that's certainly the case. That's really fascinating. And from what you've said so far, I see a lot of similarities in your worldview between with what I might consider a sort of like land-based spirituality. I mean, our idea of what sort of Celtic paganism might have incorporated, what modern druidry aims to be, in terms of that sort of like proximity to the land and that sort of like sense of the mystery of the land, and approaching other animals as communicative beings. And I don't know if that sort of rings true to you at all.
Oh, very, very much. That's why I felt like such a refugee in Vermont. I thought I can learn a new bioregion, but I did struggle across all that time. The seasons were so different, the
Right.
trees, the landscape. I felt very supported. Lake Champlain was beautiful. There was a very environmental ethos in the state, a great sense of care and a sense of place, what watershed you live in, all that kind of thing. But my teachers are out here, my tree teachers, the ones that I am able to hear or listen to. Um, so yes, very place-based, but in the course of teaching college students from many different environments and going into many different fields, I really worked at expanding that sense of connection um, to the smallest thing, the walk on your sidewalk or something.
Mm.
Um, I wanted environmental studies, and I was the director there for a number of years to not exclude anything, so that if a student wanted to go into business or nursing or environmental art, they could all enjoy those pathways fully and completely and find a sense of connection and hopefully epiphany within the path that they walked. So I always saw environmental studies secretly. I didn't tell the dean this, but as a field of liberating practice. And any class that I could design that would support students in having an awakening experience, that was my kind of underlying and perhaps unseen motivation. Um, so while I personally, I'm very glad I have a yard with a big apple tree and a little deck behind the house with a tree growing through it, part of why we were so drawn to this house. Um, I I'm practicing more in a neighborhood at this point. I'm not on a bunch of beautiful acreage with a farm as in Green Gulch, but a neighborhood is another kind of a regional unit. And
Mm.
just learning the state of Oregon with its deserts and its mountains and its geology and its tectonic plates. There's many ways to enter an earth-based understanding and carry it with you wherever you walk.
Yes, that's beautiful, and I think that I was in London on Wednesday. I live on the edge of a not very nice town, but the countryside around it is quite pretty. I mean, it's very farmed, but not in the same industrial in the same industrial level as places in the Midwest, I suppose. But in London, I was going through Regent's Park, and all the water birds, the grey lag geese had their babies. We were
Oh,
quite big babies and incredibly ugly ducklings. They were so feisty. They can I mean, where the grey lag geese I know are quite wary of Canada geese, and these two grey lag babies had a go at the adult Canada geese. I was stunned, and there was a swan lying there grooming herself with 7 cygnets just all around her. And people just walking past, and the geese were walking down the pathway, and people are walking up the pathway, and the people and the geese were just walking round each other.
mhm,
It was, I mean, and I know these are very urban animals who are very used to people, but there was something that struck me profoundly about this sense of nature culture merging, and as modeled by these sort of parents taking their children for a walk in Regent's Park, and whether they were human parents or goose parents, it actually didn't make any difference. And I enjoy the city for those moments of insight, those moments that you
mhm.
maybe see all the more clearly sometimes in the city because you're not expecting it. Outside, I'm looking for the moment that I have with a tree. In a city, I'm struck anew when I see a tree that particularly sort of calls to me or draws my attention. So I think that sense of finding your awakening everywhere is sort of beautiful and very pertinent. Do you find that in cities as well as in communities?
Yes, I think an intimacy is a state of mind. So if you carry an intimate approach to whatever you're looking at, you'll engage it in a different way. So, for example, in Japan, in Nara, there's a very large park in the city called Deer Park, named after, a deer park where the Buddha was. And watching the deer there is a fascinating study of human deer interactions and what each person carries and what the deer have trained up to do and how they manipulate the humans and how they avoid them, how they group. But that was a point at which we were supposed to be looking at Zen gardens, I guess. And I just was like, this is really interesting. How has this evolved here? So, a kind of likewise, as we got up closer to this one temple at the top of the hill, there were these wild, craggy vines hanging down out of the trees. And I thought, what am I looking at? Nobody else was stopping, to see it at all. And it turned out to be wisteria that had been let to grow way up into the trees. They were even propping up some of the wisteria vines as they crossed over the main walkway. They were like dragons, dragon plants out there. At the very time they were in bloom, our wisteria on the front porch was coming into bloom, and it's I don't know, 50-year-old. So it's really, it's the mother plant of this place, and it just hangs over the front of the porch. So I was in this mind stream, this intimate mind stream of wisteria that felt global and also kind of historical. And it was the most intriguing experience. So this sense of giving yourself to your own intimate experience of the moment with your full presence is what enables those encounters. Now, building relationship and learning over time, that's kind of a different level of intimacy. But in the immediate presence, you at least catch a glimpse of something bigger than whatever you thought the world was. So in this case, the unseen was the dragon spirit of wisteria. And I really wanted to see what I could see of it.
I love that dragon spirit of wisteria. Let's move on to trees now specifically. Although wisteria is a vine, but it was growing on a tree. How do what do you mean? What does it mean to you to commune with trees? And you've written this beautiful book about conversations with trees, and it feels to me like an ongoing intimate meditation with natural history and personhood all woven together.
Well, I will say that I have a wonderful partner in this, and I feel very fortunate. Yes, the artist of that book. I met at a Buddhist meditation retreat a week before I moved to Vermont, Davis Tissell, and I had this book manuscript, and I just thought it will be a better book if we can see the trees and people can enter into these stories. But I had no idea how to just kind of find an artist out of the blue. So it so happened that he was sitting next to me at a lunch table, like on the last day before the end of the retreat. And as I described what I was looking for, he later told me that it sort of sent chills up his spine because I didn't want somebody that was going to project a kind of watercolory, oozy, spirit of tree. And I didn't want a scientific illustrator that would be so super objective that it would be kind of sterile. So I thought,
Mm,
surely there's someone who can be accurate and attentive to the intimate details of a tree and be listening to the heart of the tree in some way. In my mind, a picture of a tree was, a child's, here's the trunk, here's the branches, here's the leaves. So I had absolutely no idea that what anybody could do. But he just said, well, let me see what I can do. And I took him to many of these sites, and in the book you can see that he created a story and a composition and
yeah,
a way to enter the field of the tree in the pictures. And I sometimes think these are almost more important, if not equal important, to the stories. So we have an ongoing dialogue about trees, and we introduce each other to trees we find, and we
do you?
organize our trips around trees we want to meet. And we go back, like we went back to the bristlecone pines. We wanted to see them again. And that passage you wrote about the twining bristlecones, that was sort of a symbol for us and finding each other. And he did a large version of that print, which is in our bedroom, is spectacular. So it's a very helpful to be in a home household setting where you're not questioned and challenged about something that's very sensitive and empathic. And instead, we get as many tree books as we can. We look at as much tree art as we can, and it's it just keeps expanding that way. So, and artists and poets commune with trees in a very helpful way for
Yeah,
those of us who are, more verbal and more in terms of writing. So, right now, I guess how I would say it is something about keeping a very open, curious mind around any and all trees and the experience I'm having with them right then, and uh, trying to be thoughtfully in the presence of the tree, constraining my own ego projections. And that is a really challenging Buddhist practice.
mhm,
Um, and then a combined there's a difference between attuning to the specific tree, like this apple tree that I is right out my window as we speak, and understanding the collective life of a forest or a river or a mountain and what the trees are collectively doing in a certain space. Um, I was very interested in this in Japan, and it was remarkably most of their forests that we traveled through by bus were monocultures of cryptomeria of the Japanese cedar or redwood. It's very close to our California redwood. So I couldn't get a sense of a complex forest. And ironically, these beautiful temples built out of huge timbers um, meant very serious cutting of these forests over and over again. So finding old growth trees in Japan is a challenge. So it's a practice, this communing, and I I try to avoid what should I say, idealizing a tree, stereotyping a tree, like, oh, it's another Douglas fir, must be like this, swooning over it. Um, the hardest thing is the projections. And again, this happened for me just a week or so ago. We had to prune our overgrown cherry tree, which mostly we just let the trees go do what they do, and the squirrels love it. The trees all just, kind of overlap together, and the squirrels run through them like a great parkour course. But the neighbors thought it might be better if not quite that much of the tree was growing over their yard. So we luckily found some very good tree whisperers who understood our concerns and very skillfully kind of brought the tree back and then mulched that part of the tree and spread it all underneath the cherry and the apple. And I had to just watch my mind the whole time, like, this is good, this feels bad. Oh, the tree, I felt the tree, Oh, but then we'll feed the tree. So it was an endless revelation of the way the human mind is in the middle of a relationship with the tree. So I think communing is a challenge. It's an awareness practice. And if it's part of an overall Buddhist or spiritual practice of increasing and expanding your awareness and coming more and more awake all the time to the foibles of your own mind, it can be very informative. Though I will say that doesn't mean it's not uncomfortable or sometimes extremely painful. Um, so, uh, in the meantime, when I'm not out around trees, I try to learn what I can so that some of my misconceptions get dispelled by reading about, oh, geologically, this is how far the glaciers came down, and that's why we have oak trees here and not there. Or seasonally, what are these trees doing as they're producing their acorns or their mast? Or evolutionarily, how are they responding to climate change? So being smart about what's going on about them by learning from others. So that's some of what goes on for me.
I very much appreciate the way that you draw together that sense of this of the responsibility to gain knowledge, to gain the knowledge that helps you to avoid the projections, as well as the practice of avoiding projection at the same time. My the only practice I do is sitting with, well, I sit with, I have a sort of I say a thank you thing in my garden every morning, but really it's sort of with the trees, and that process of avoiding the projection is the, that is the hardest thing. But the other thing I very much experience with, or very much relate to, you mentioned that it's not always comfortable, that sometimes I feel not humbled, but I feel that the way that the trees are is so different in many ways from the way that we as humans, and not any particular culture, like to envisage or prescribe upon the world, that it can be uncomfortable to be with someone whose views are so entirely different, or who feels as if their views are, I'm embarrassing myself now, like trees saying to me, having very much the sense of the earth as being a foundation. Well, it is foundational, but the earth as being that which we will all fall towards, and the importance, always have such a strong sense of the importance of tending the earth, of caring for the earth, of that being a kind of ultimate. Do you get a sense of conversation as well as communion?
Um, Best if I'm alone, that is for sure. It's if there's other human conversation going on, that interferes quite a bit. It's very,
Yes, I couldn't do that then.
yes, human words are quite dominating. But um, by myself, I can't be sure. What am I hearing? You know, if I hear certain, is it a tree helping me hear myself?
Yes,
Some kind of key insight or koan, or is it the tree manifesting some property or behavior that I can see and understand? So I try not to say what it is, but I like
yes,
the kind of overarching concept of teaching. So if
yes,
I feel I'm getting a teaching, you can get teachings from yourself and from trees and some combination, but you
yes,
don't have to name the origin necessarily.
yes,
So you can just say it's from the relationship, perhaps. Um, but it's not important if the receptivity is there. That's the open aspect. Being open to something that you can't name is the practice that you then can take into those intimate relations that we were speaking of. So I think of the trees as practice partners.
yes.
That's a nice way to think about it.
That is a nice way to think about it. Have you said it's not always comfortable. What did you mean by saying it's not always comfortable?
Well, we have quite a history here in the Northwest of logging and clear cuts, and it's sometimes very painful to be hiking and suddenly come through one, or to see the extent through aerial photographs. For me, anytime I hear a chainsaw, I really, I just kind of freeze inside. I know a murder is going on. I try to see where it is to make sure if it's just a tree pruning, then, good, the tree will survive. But, um, the people that came to work on this tree for us explained that people have developed quite a fear of trees around here, which is very sad because we have a very green, highly treed city in Portland. And it's because of some of these climate extreme events when a branch will fall in their yard or hit their roof or fall into the street and take a power line out. And as a consequence, they will call an arborist to just take the tree out completely when the tree is perfectly healthy and could be shaped or etc. It's painful to this particular arborist team to see how
Mm.
objectifying and quick the decisions can be made out of fear of trees. So they said one of the things they do is a lot of psychological counseling with people, helping them support a tree into a kind of life that's manageable in that location. I'm very grateful for their work. Uh, so it is anytime a tree is being cut into, I really feel it. And I would recommend for people this recent book called The Light Eaters,
It's
which
wonderful.
documents plant behaviors and plant sensitivities, all the current scientific research, and they know what's going on biochemically are reflecting what's happening, whether it's some kind of stress or et cetera, or being eaten by bugs. So uh, I sometimes struggle with unclear boundaries, I suppose a psychologist would say, of what is the tree feeling? What am I feeling? Why am I reacting so much? But I feel the pain of the tree and then of the forest too. When you lose so many trees, you completely change the growing conditions, it dries out. We've really lost something incredibly special here in the Northwest that we'll never get back again in terms of the huge old trees of so many species that just, graced all these mountains and were just mown down by greed. Uh, but I have to embrace that as well and be intimate with that and understand it's part of what's on this land.
We have there are more ancient trees in Britain than in any other country in Europe, and probably than most other countries. Having said that, we have very little actual forest cover, and only 1% of our ancient woodlands are intact, which is an absolutely minuscule percentage. And a humiliating one. The ancient trees, I mean, a lot of them have been preserved because they're on parkland that's owned by rich families or titled families. But it does mean that we also have all the sort of particular fungi and invertebrates that require veteran trees to fulfill their life cycles, and there are specific a lot of specific invertebrates and so on for that who require veteran trees. But it's one of the biggest problems that we have is that there is very, very limited natural regeneration of woodlands because we don't have any large herbivores who are coming through knocking trees down, but we do have an awful lot of small herbivores who are eating all the baby trees. So either the trees can't grow because it's closed canopy and there's no ground flora, and so you can't have the baby trees can't grow in there. And if the baby trees do manage to get a foothold, a root hold on the outside, they're promptly eaten by herbivores. So you have sort of woodlands that are in a sort of still are in a very unhealthy situation, and it's a really difficult one because the people who support trees and whose concern is the priority of trees do want there to be fewer deer and squirrels. How do you think about issues of that nature when there genuinely is that it's a situation of a dilemma? It's a real dilemma.
You're, I just had that experience in Japan, so it's very close to the painful part of my heart. Those deer in Nara Park, there were hundreds of them that would come down out of the adjacent forest, and there was no ground cover. I mean, they ate everything. And I think from the Japanese standpoint, the deer sort of like were seen as sacred. In fact, it was a logo, and they were selling deer-related stuff in all the little shops, and they were spiritually proud of that connection to the Buddha's time in India, but they did not understand ecologically what damage these deer were doing to this beautiful park. It was astonishing to me that with that many big trees and a well-established park, that there was hardly a blade of grass in some places. And so consequently, the ground was compacted, the
Yeah.
soil around the roots was exposed. It just was not a healthy situation. But of course, there was nobody on the trip that really understood what I was talking about. So I didn't really bring it up because they weren't going to see it through my eyes. But it really is up to the pioneering restorationists and the people who understand the ecology of this to do experimental patches, to do experimental clearing, to kind of figure out how can this be done. And sometimes they run up against climatic conditions have changed so much that even if you think you're creating better conditions, light gaps and so on, there still might not be any regeneration. So we're all just kind of fumbling around in a way. And I applaud the places where there's been some success. I know there's been a lot of planting up in the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah, the cairngorms.
I accept, I guess, that painfully, we, like all periods of time, keep changing climatically. And it's very helpful to read geology for this, to understand, that we've had 4 different complete atmospheres on this planet. And you have to put the tree reproduction in that context. And we may or may not retain some of these beautiful elder species. But one thing we have to make peace with is the fact we will not see the outcome of any of these long-term experiments as short-term animals on the planet. And I think that was one of the first hardest lessons for me in doing tree and forest work, that I wanted it all to be better, right now. And the lifespans weren't going to add up that way. So I
Yeah.
support the parts I can right now, and where I can support people being more sensitive and alert and awake with trees, like how we chose these arborists. I really want to do that. But it's a very big project, and we don't know how it will turn out. I will say that modern ecologists, younger people, I think are much better at systems thinking, much more creative, much more willing to try different experiments. So I think it's gone in the right direction of opening to much more complicated human nature relations. And it's been supported by the kinds of science they've done to, and the same with the nonprofits and the educators and the restorationists. It's so let's just keep helping it
Going.
go in that direction.
Well, you mentioned the tree planting in Scotland, and I think that is there is a lot in the Cairngorms. But in I visited, and you'll know about the Knepp estate, Isabella Tree. Have you read
No,
Wilding?
no, I haven't yet.
But I mean the Knepp estate for everyone. England's a very small country, and they have a project of rewilding in the Cairngorms in Scotland. Cairngorms Connect, and Cairngorms Scotland's also a small country, but there's a lot fewer people there. England's a very small country with a lot of people in it. So a rewilding project in England is not going to be like Yellowstone. That would take up almost all of our country. It's 1,400 hectares, but they have gone through gone through a sort of rewilding with large low impact grazing from large herds of free roaming herbivores. And it's very, very interesting because this place was an estate, a landed gentry estate, with traditional parkland, and then farmed. And so they've rewilded it. They're doing this. And aesthetically, it's so different. I mean, I can imagine, because you suddenly say, well, there's brambles everywhere. It looks a right mess. But you hear the birds. People camp there and complain that the dawn chorus is too loud. Because
Wonderful.
all these birds that have been leaving the countryside, there's been something like a 97% decline in turtle doves over the past 30 years. They're at Knepp. Where they are now is Knepp, because that is providing the sort of situation that they're in, and they've got quite a lot of older trees, and hopefully those ones will be healthy. I know we're going to have to let people get in some questions, because I've totally been hogging your time here, Stephanie. But I just wanted you to talk a little bit about forest bathing before we open up.
Well, if people haven't heard about it, I'd love for you just to look up a little bit and see what you can find out. It's basically the practice of spending time in a forest with a tree. Some of it, sometimes it's walking meditation can be part of it. One of the common practices is finding a sit spot and just sitting there under the tree for a certain amount of time, and if possible, returning to that same spot at different points. The fascinating thing to me about this is how organized it's become. It's intuitively a very natural thing to think, oh, I'd like to walk in a forest or sit under a tree. In Japan, where this concept has really taken hold, it's seen as a literal medicinal practice for calming high blood pressure and stressed out nerves, and doctors write prescriptions to go for certain periods of time of forest bathing per week or over the month. And now the forests, the national forests and the parks have gotten a certification program set up so that they are certified as forest bathing spots. So this has greatly increased people's visits in a Japanese kind of a way. They're they like to tick off boxes and count things and do things in groups, but they're getting into the forest and being with trees. Now, in the States, how it sort of evolved is that people are gaining certification as forest bathing, not teachers, guides, I guess it is. And as it turned out, my sister here, my half sister, right here in Portland, got really into this and took the training that offered through a world association and did her week-long retreat as a kind of culminating part of getting your certificate in Japan right before I went there. So we had quite a lot to talk about together, and I wish I could have seen the trees that they took her to, because they were on an island with old growth.
Mm.
So it's a concept that's quite beautiful, and I started tonight talking about komorebi as an aspect of what you can enjoy in a forest, the play of light and breeze and shadow and pattern. Um, but it's also just an opportunity to literally calm down and let the forest help ease the very troubled minds that we carry all the time in today's overstimulating, overcrowded, hyper-individualistic, politically challenged world. We're not in a very safe world at the moment. So the forest bathing is just really good medicine, and I encourage any of you to try it if you haven't, and you don't have to even call it that. Just go soak it up. I think the word bathing surely came from the Japanese hot spring onsens, where the hot baths are seen as so healing and are prescribed as medicine and are a public asset. So just a shift from hot springs to forest was an easy thing to do in that context. And lucky us, we can adopt another cool thing from Japan.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to welcome any of you, invite any of you who are in this meeting to raise a hand, or if you wanted to post something in the chat, it would be lovely to hear from you. Faye, and Andrea, yes, please.
I'm just so delighted to meet you, Stephanie. I've resonated with all your stories, the interweaving, and very much appreciate your loyalty to your calling, bringing that light into the forest by being attracted to as a child, and then making the light of the forest more tangible to others, that it is a living, that you've touched the heart of nature and its own true light, and represented that and inspired people. I also love the weave between ecology and Buddhism, and having met and read Joanna's work and done her work, and the work that reconnects and others. But also my own work as a flower essence practitioner that started off with close observation with plants and then moved into deeper listening and realized how much I was being altered through the process of the intimacy. And that's, I think, where your work is taking us to a whole edge of how our human nature can evolve through that quality of intimacy that you've obviously lived and are sharing today in beautiful ways. So thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you for your close listening. I see in the chat that someone had to leave, mentioned how her reading list has just now expanded, and I will add another book to that by Robert McFarlane, who is very sensitive to these things. And his new book, I just was at a book reading night before, is called Is a River Alive?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I think this is really going to notch this exact conversation up another level. For rivers, he could be asking, is a tree alive? A similar thing. But luckily, we have people that are such beautiful writers like him to help guide us and take us further down these journeys.
I think that nature is an instructor in terms of language, because you can't resonate with nature and then represent it just in human language. So a process of relanguaging our psyche, informing it, changes the very nature of our languaging, and brings out a level of artistry that carries the authority of nature itself. And I think that hasn't been recognized fully. Although the poets, anyway, I could go on. I will be quiet, but I hear that nature informed wisdom in your words, and I look forward to reading your books as well.
Thank you very much.
Cecilia, you have your hand up. Hello, Cecilia. Have you switched? Oh no, she is there. Oh, there you are.
Just to unmute.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I don't hear her. I
Oh,
think the rest of us don't.
oh yes.
She needs to unmute, or somebody has to
Unmute.
let her
Can you
unmute.
unmute yourself? Can I do it? Ask to unmute.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
All
there you
right.
go.
I think what happened is we were both pushing the button at the same time. Malfunctions. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I've had lots of experiences with trees for a number of years. Yeah, they taught me a lot. They gave me many experiences, and then I was supposed to give a talk to my community about them, and then another talk, and so on. And the trees set up the talk, guided it, told me when. I had instructions. This, to remember this talk is not about you. So it wasn't supposed to be about I, this and that. Um, which of course is part of the story, but um, I think they were looking for, or they have been looking for human vehicles to convey something of their reality and what they have to offer, and in a compelling way, because it's so very needed. Um, and I wanted to share one anecdote that corresponds to what you said, Stephanie, about where you felt at home and where you didn't feel at home. Um, I live in Vermont, and the Northeast does feel like my home on the earth, and that's where I had my experiences with trees, or where they started. And then I went and visited for a while in the San Francisco area in California, and it was just, um, you know, I, I I couldn't feel connected to it. But I tried to, and the first thing I did when I went there was to um, get to Muir Woods, because it was the closest place with big trees. And I walked in that woods, and as I went along the path, I could feel it was like dials being recalibrated within my body. It was like clicks and energy shifts and everything in my body. It was like the combination lock was being reset, so I could connect with the trees there and the land there. And wasn't that interesting that we could be uniquely calibrated for a certain area. And then another anecdote I wanted to share was that there were many parts to these experiences, many different kinds of experiences. And there was one later on in it, which was a whole series of um, my guidance would direct me to where a great tree had been cut down or was in the process of being cut down. So that was that part of it, and just feeling that, centrally feeling that grief and regret. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
I want to add something to your experience in Muir Woods. I've walked there many, many times from living at Green Gulch and going back to visit, and I have a great feeling for the redwoods. That particular piece of land was saved very dramatically, donated, and so on, when so many other redwoods up and down the coast were cut to rebuild San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. And the superintendent who's been there for so long, Mia, what's Mia's last name? Loves that place and has loved it and has protected it and has supported the public in it and has protected it, for example, from holding weddings and, large gatherings, and kept a contemplative experience as a high priority. So and then worked on bus shuttles to get people there because it was so popular. So the actual management has been based on a very loving relationship with these trees, and we've all been able to benefit from the orientation that the people have had towards this particular place. It's been just a wonderful thing to witness.
That's really interesting, and it makes me this leads on to something that Cecilia mentioned. You talk some of the time about re-inhabiting place, and it seems to me that you are drawing our attention to the importance with which one is emotionally invested in place.
Mhm. Yes, I think it's like knowing your neighborhood. Who lives there? What are the landmarks? During COVID, it got very interesting to walk and walk and walk so much in a small area. And so now when I walk, I'm checking on so many different individual trees and plants and bushes. And okay, now their lilies are blooming, and now over there, the next, oh, they've got their coreopsis is up. I mean, it's remarkably intimate. So that's how I think of re-inhabiting place, and concepts like landmarks, which are very crucial to any indigenous populations because those were your sight lines. Those were how you set your pathways or how you knew the edges of things. So here in Portland, I'm keen on the shapes of the rivers. Where's the Willamette flowing? The Columbia, where did the Ice Age floods spread terminal moraine? How far down the Pacific was that moraine dropped all the way to Mendocino? And Mount Hood and the three mountains and their relationship right here, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens. So re-inhabiting can happen at the most small scale and can be built on. So Gary Snyder writes about this very beautifully. And this is what I think they've tried to do at Muir Woods. They've invited people to come in and replant native plants where there has been erosion or drawback. To keep the understory live and refreshing, and to do sometimes work in the creek to help people have an ongoing relationship. And Green Gulch Farm sometimes would send people, I mean, the Zen Center, over to do that work, and they had to work out like also political relationships as to landowners as a way to re-inhabit. And when the people at Golden Gate National Monument and Muir Woods wanted to reestablish a way for the salmon to come back up into Muir Woods, they had to work with Green Gulch to create an entirely new entry or no exit of Redwood Creek down through the beach area there that would support salmon flow. It had been, caught in asphalt and parking lots, and it wasn't well thought out at the time. So this was a massive restoration project, and all that was behind the scenes of your one short experience in Muir Woods to see how thoughtful they were about the the valley there in Green Gulch and the ridges on either side, and how different was Frank's Valley and the grazing rights. I mean, all those questions. If you want to re-inhabit the land, you can't just do it from a naturalist and a field-based point of view. You have to understand the politics, the economics, the cultures, who's lived there before, whose ancestors learned about that land in different ways. It's a pretty big life project. And part of it is honoring the impact of white, usually settler colonialism. So that is something that not many Buddhists have taken up or many field naturalists. So I'm very interested in that intersection where the climate justice people are doing this, but it's happening among a younger generation to really ask, what have we brought as settler colonialists to the land as a people, and what do we need to undo, and whose wisdom can we learn from and respect and cultivate and also bring back to the land? So a lot more could be said about all that, but it's a fun big project to be part of.
Well, are there fish back there? Because that was another thing I felt at the time, the sadness of the stream that there were no fish.
What time of year were you there?
I don't even remember. It could have been 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and my memory isn't very good.
Well,
But that was
can't,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know the exact year and what was
sure.
coming back when, but also it's a seasonal thing. And so you could have easily missed the salmon even without knowing what their pattern was there.
Oh,
Uh, so this is a really good example of um, what you don't know leads you to come to certain conclusions. So
but
what?
I wasn't thinking that. I wasn't thinking that. It came to me. It wasn't like a thought that I had. It was so I must have been there before the salmon came back or before there were any fish.
Well, I would encourage you on something like that to double check the thoughts that come to you. This
Oh,
is that gray zone that I'm very cautious about with a kind of Zen don't mind. Is this accurate, or what actually is the thought reflecting? Is it coming from somewhere in the surroundings or from me? It's hard to tell. It's hard to be sure what's accurate.
yeah.
So um
I I worked on that a lot in recognizing energies. But anyway, I let's see. There was um one other
Cecilia,
question.
can I
Go
just
ahead.
interrupt you for a moment and let Kat have she's
Okay,
had her
go
hand up
ahead.
for a while, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
That's okay. I forgot what I was going to say.
Kat
Yeah,
Actually,
it's
or
technically
Mr. Cat.
Justin, but cat Tenzin. So Stephanie, you had said before that when you go to sit with trees, that it's important to not bring your preconceived notions of what, like the grandeur of a Douglas fir or, whatever notions we have. Are there any techniques that you use to minimize those thoughts?
I would say a kind of basic Zen practice is to try to notice everything, not to ban them, not to say now I'll do this practice to squelch all my projections. It's more to see, oh, right now, for example, I'm drawn to the biggest tree. Well, is that reinforcing a stereotype that every other tree doesn't matter as much? Or why do you need a big tree right now? A little bit of skepticism, a little bit of self-questioning, so that at the same time that you're trying to stay receptive and in relationship with the other beings around you, you're also staying in relationship with your own mind and checking those, trying to bring those thoughts forward enough that you can see them or hear them, because we're so conditioned and enculturated. This isn't about being bad or good. It's being a human being with a conditioned mind. So I find Buddhist practice very helpful for that because it just starts from that position that your path to liberation is through awakening in the midst of the conditioned mind.
Mhm.
So any stereotype you bump into is an opportunity for awakening and to see, oh, why did I like conifers more than, the angiosperms right now? And I'd say that I have quite a thing for conifers. They're older, evolutionarily, so they
Mhm.
must have more wisdom, etc. Um, but then we'll go sit by an oak. Oaks are amazing. And to
Mhm.
understand, well, that's because look where oaks have grown and look how many different habitats. So it's a fascinating field, and I generally would just say the quieter and slower you are, the more you are able to hear what's going on in your own mind. Um, if you're listening to music while you're by the tree, well, then you'll hear music. But so it takes some effort to slow down. And while I was working on the book, I did a lot of walking meditation with the trees that I was visiting, and that's what helped me as a kind of transition zone, a kind of gateway from the very busy, verbal, noisy human world to whatever else was around the tree, just to kind of settle down all that activity going on in my own energetic field.
Okay. Thank you. And then as a fellow Portlander, what are your favorite spots to go to do that around here or around Portland?
Oh my gosh. Well, we luckily live about halfway between Laurelhurst Park and Mount Tabor.
Nice.
So, excuse me, I am very fortunate to be able to just casually go over to either of these places on a regular basis. And Mount Tabor is a little more wild, but
Mount Tabor is one of my favorite places to go
Yeah.
and take a run. So
yeah.
We're pretty close to
yes.
there, so. And the gorge too. I mean, the
The
gorge.
gorge, I really love. I'm quite distressed right now with the fire at Rowena and
Yes.
want it to get up to Rowena Plateau, one of my favorite spots. So we are lucky in Portland to have a very large park called Forest Park that they had attempted to develop at one point and
Right?
yeah, luckily failed completely to get water lines in, and wiser minds, whose shoulders, of course, we all stand on, prevailed to just conserve and protect it. And it's very beloved, big, big patch of forest. One end of it that's closer into town is a lot of ivy and a lot of invasive plants and fewer number of species. So when I can, I like to go to the other end, which is less traveled and a little wilder, more species and less ivy. So interesting to just get to know the spaces that we're lucky to be part of. But we also have a very active urban forestry commission and a tree historic program that preserves older trees. And luckily a lot of tree lovers in this area that are trying to understand the whole canopy and plant trees in the parts of the city that don't have them and make this less of an urban heat island situation. So I feel very at home with this many thoughtful tree people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Cecilia, have you remembered your question or?
Yeah. Yes. Since you're connected with the scientific community, I haven't read this, but I wish there was more written about the ways our bodies are designed as tree climbers and tree dwellers ancestrally. Yeah, what little I know is that well, our primate ancestors were tree climbers, and our upper bodies still retain a lot of that sort of brachiation design, and I mean they wouldn't be built the way they are and need the kind of movement they need if all we were doing was carrying shopping bags from Walmart, you know. Excuse me for being sarcastic, but when you look at dancers and athletes, you know how much work they do with their upper body and pulling their arms up and all of that, and you know the movements through the trees and how they're replicated in dance. So the bigger point is our central correspondence with trees and relationship, and you know that they are our ancestral home.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think people who develop their upper body have a better sense of what you're talking about. I mean, that really do the workouts or so on. But you know, I don't want to sneeze here on you. Some of the people that do that the most beautifully are swimmers, and they're not developing their powerful chests and upper body
Yes.
to climb in trees, but to plow through water. And so you might point to their other mammalian ancestors, the whales and
Yes.
dolphins and
Yes.
the fish before that.
Yes. Yes.
There's a long
Yes.
evolutionary inheritance in this apparatus we've got, both the nerve systems, the bones, the muscles, and I just have to say, taking anatomy as a young, whatever, 18-year-old of animals, evolutionary anatomy was one of the most fascinating things to get at exactly what you're talking about, whether
Yes.
it was primates or hoofed animals or all of the mammals and vertebrates that have our basic setup have a similar energetic organization, but they, of course, use it for different things and have evolved in different contexts. And not all human beings have evolved in treed contexts. So some of the early ones have, but northern peoples are not climbing trees up in the Arctic. And so it's highly varied how it's gone, but it's energetically really fun to kind of explore and feel it. I love to climb trees myself, though I don't do it quite as much now at this age.
I try.
Yeah,
I never
And
get
we're,
very
we're
good.
missing tails. This is really a problem. If you had a
I miss my
tail,
tail.
you would have a better point of grabbing, and you'd have, a 5-point hold on things.
I wanted to ask how all of this understanding has impacted your actions in the world. What do you do differently? What has your behaviors and your beliefs, your ethics, and consequently your actions changed the more and more that you've learnt, practiced, studied, and experienced?
Well, that's kind of a big life question. In a practical way, I've become quite a serious gardener, which I wasn't when I was younger. But with COVID, of course, was a part of it, but it was more around cultivating a sensitivity to plants that were smaller than trees and understanding it as more of a continuum that I could really be paying attention to my squash plant or my uh, sunflowers and still cultivating that kind of sensitivity. Plant sensitivity is so different than animal sensitivity, um, evolutionarily and so on. But I think we're very receptive. We have the long lineage mind stream of the herbalists and of the medicinal people and the people growing things with trees over time for basket weaving and etc. So there's a long human mind stream to draw on with plants. Um, I I constantly carry the pain and sorrow for the world, and I'm more willing to say that. I guarded myself against it, cried privately after giving big environmental studies lectures, that kind of thing. But now I think it's a way to welcome people to their own levels of pain and sorrow they carry for what has been lost, and really how incredibly foolish and cruel we are as a very young species on the planet. As some of the tribal elders talk about, we're the youngest sibling, our elder brothers and sisters are wolf and, Doug Fir and Raven. And we could learn a lot. So where my work has gone is through climate protection, and I wouldn't have predicted that, and I wished it didn't have to be that. I wish we weren't clobbering our climate so badly. So for a while, I got a seminar series going here. Once I moved to Portland, people just help people talk about climate, a kind of climate cafe. And I've just been appointed now to a new commission in the city called the Sustainability and Climate Commission to support the staff and the city council in Portland's climate work. So I'm eager to see what that work will involve and kind of glad to be in an official capacity, maybe. We'll see. Um, but as I sort of live more and more in place, I feel I should invest more and more in this particular place. This watershed, this city, this state, this bioregion of Cascadia. I have wonderful maps of Cascadia on my walls. So always trying to be part of the action that's carrying us in the right direction of healing and restoration, even though we don't know how the balance is going to play out at the moment. We're under a lot of threat with the current government administration losing ground rapidly, and I have a difficult time reading Bill McKibben's columns over and over. He's one of my climate heroes and a colleague from the work in Vermont, but I don't want to turn away from it either. And where I can be part of an intergenerational effort, it's especially meaningful to me. So on this climate commission, there will be, I think, 4 of the people are the youth representatives, and
Fantastic.
it's important to find a way to not just pass the baton, but understand the finitude of my own life and encourage those younger than me to be as impassioned and as engaged. And if I can encourage them with some Buddhism, fine. But I practice what Sulak Sivaraksa called small B Buddhism, which means you don't crow about it a lot. You just kind of do it and be skillful. I'm a very big fan of the Buddhist concept skillful means. And this Zen center I'm affiliated with, upaya, that's a Sanskrit word. Upaya is skillful means, which means in the right situation, choosing what will be most effective and not imposing what is ultimately ineffective because it carries too much of your ego or your ideas or your energy behind it. So
That sounds,
that's
it
a little
sounds,
bit.
it's a word that it makes me think of acting in a way that's sort of propitious.
Right action is one of the 8 spokes of the and right livelihood, right speech. And those things we can practice kind of all the time with any of our environmental concerns or conversations with people. Uh, it's to just be in a practice state of mind really helps with this kind of action. And I would say that's the biggest change after whatever it's been, 40 years of Buddhist practice. I don't really think in any other way other than trying to be in a continuous state of practice mind.
And do you think that, I mean, can you imagine what the world might be like if more people, all people, had this considered and intimate and sort of place-based attitude towards the world, and seeing the world as well, as you've suggested, as a possibly communicative other, so that you can be in relationship with that other? How do you think the world would be different? Can you imagine?
Well, the whole world, I'm not sure, but I think there might be a lot more humility and respect and good collaborative partnerships with people who already are carrying values that support healing, restorative recovery mode for the planet. We got a lot of repair work to do, and we've got some things that are working against us, but we also have tremendous creativity and imagination. So I think the world that would be leading towards a healthier, safer, more kind place for many different species would just have more and more people with those orientations and the possibility to invite back to our forests, to our rivers, those who have been banished or flown or are no longer been able to survive in these arenas. We recently in Oregon removed some dams from the Klamath River, and it's been so heartening to see how quickly the fish do come back and the other beings. So it's it's looking to the place where that leading edge of healing and restoration is happening, and just imagining that expanding more and more based on people's examples and hard work and transfer of knowledge and understanding across generations, because it will take more than one generation to make this a more habitable planet again.
Absolutely beautiful. And in a mode of humility and respect, oh, thank you so much for your time today, Stephanie. Unless anyone else has any sort of like final word to say. Oh, Stephanie, you do.
Oh, Mike has had his hand up, so I didn't want to.
Has he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, sorry, I haven't seen
Yeah.
your hand.
No.
His
Thank
real
you.
hand, not his digital
You
Oh,
hand.
know,
his real hand.
I'm interested in the solitude that you gained. Have you ever gone into the desert and with a Joshua tree? The yucca, and some of the other plants out there are the oldest on the planet. It doesn't seem like it, but there's areas out there that are absolutely you can get solitude there, I think, that you cannot get anywhere else. And the night sky is incredible too.
I feel very lucky to live in a place that's not far from a desert. This is one of the great gifts of this state. The basin and range habitat extends up into southern Oregon, so I don't have to go to Southern California, although that particular desert with the Joshua trees is very profound. A desert environment has a strong calling. And for people that love trees and shelter and shade, it's a good complement to really understand the seasonal rhythms, the wet times, the dry times, and the profound adaptation of the plants that are in these dry places. They have done remarkable things. So I'm really glad to know that you've had some quiet time with the Joshua trees. They're almost a little overrun with people eager for that, and there's a lot of good bouldering near those Joshua trees.
Yeah.
And we're all kind of watching what our desert people, how they will respond to these droughts. The saguaros are having a tough time, and some of the Joshua trees are too. So we'll see how well those adaptations will carry them through higher temperatures, and there may be some pain and sorrow there too. So,
Well, you also mentioned the situation with the deer in Japan.
mhm.
Have they wiped out all their predatory animals in Japan, where the deer can't be controlled through predatory interrelationships with the natural process of predator prey?
No, these deer are encouraged. They sell little cookies that you can feed to the deer. They're a tourist attraction. So I don't know anything about the level of predator populations in Japan, and this is one city. It's not, and I can't speak to deer all over Japan, but in Nara, it's a thing. It's like, it could be a panda or a koala or a kangaroo, but for them, the deer
Uh-huh.
is their beloved animal. So they want to be interacting with it. They don't want to have them being killed in this park, and there are hundreds of them. So I'm not sure what happens when they go back up into the forest at night. But it doesn't look like there's a lot of controls on that population.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I relate to that because I will have to work with NOAA on restoration ecology and wetlands in Southern California. So it's very difficult now because of the cutbacks.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Stephanie, for seeing that that Mike had his hand up. I don't know if there's anything final you wanted to say, Stephanie, but all gratitude for spending this time with us. It was as delightful as reading Conversations with Trees.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just would encourage people to go outside and spend a little time with the tree. And if you didn't know that word, komorebi, now you can enjoy that, and wherever it crosses your path, that beautiful shadowing pattern, the flicker and light, and let yourself be mesmerized.
Thank you so much. I'll hand back to Olivia.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and everybody for your wonderful questions, and Stephanie for all the wisdom you shared with us today. Our next and final Living One speaker in this series will be 1 week from today on June 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. In this very special Living One session, we are going to be joined by 4 contributors to the book Dark Matter, Women Witnessing, Dreams Before Extinction. One of them, Andrea, was here today, and in addition to Andrea, we'll be joined by Nancy Windhart, Michaela Harrison, and Shante Sojourn Zenith. If you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Carullos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website, carullos.org. For those of you who have not already joined our Living One course, if you would like to come to our final gathering in 2 weeks from today, you are still welcome to do so. You can enroll at our website or contact us at contact@carullos.org if you have any questions. If you'd like to deepen your experience and practice with mindfulness, you can join us every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time for Vital Breath for Earth. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us today, and always we look forward to seeing you next week. And Stephanie, thank you so much again.